Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Jack's Corner. I'm Tarzan Bonanno, and again, we are here with Jack Figgle himself, our founder. Today, we are going to be talking about your personal background in the church, as opposed to professional and just growing up in general. So, as every week, where do you want to start with here?
Well, I'll start with first, Lord Jesus Christ, and
Glory to him
hello.
forever.
Yeah, it's a great pleasure to be here again and having this chat with Tarzan. Um, I guess the best place to start is the very beginning, day zero or day one, the day I was born. Um, both of my grandparents, or all four of my grandparents, and both of my parents belonged to the same Byzantine Greek Catholic Church in Duquesne, Pennsylvania, by the name of Saints Peter and Paul. And so I was, born into the Greek Catholic Church from day one. Father Stephen Loya of the famous Loya priestly family was the pastor. With his large family, back in those days, our church had married clergy. And he had a very large family. And I'm told the reason he was assigned to St. Peter and Paul in Duquesne is because it had the largest parish house to handle all of his kids. And I think the number is that he had 16 children, all told. Two of them,
16 children.
16 children. Two of them became priests. One was a nun, and of course he had many grandchildren, and on and on. And he was my pastor up until when I graduated from high school. So he was in Duquesne. I think he was in Duquesne 40 years until he retired in 1972 when I graduated high school. So I
Real
was born and
quick,
raised in the church.
you said that back in the day you had married clergy. Wasn't it the case that they had to come from another country to be a married clergy until recently in the Eastern Catholic Church?
Yeah, well, it varied from church to church in the sense of the Melkites had sort of one set of policies, the Ukrainians had another set, Ruthenians a third set, and so forth. So each of those different jurisdictions had a different approach, but the clergy, the married clergy ban was put into effect in I think 1929 by a papal encyclical called Cum Data Furet. It's Latin for, I don't know what the first words were, but that's the name of it. And it was that the Pope had issued this decree that uh, men in America could not be ordained to the priesthood if they were married, and that married clergy could no longer come from Europe at that point in time. So 1929. Now, Father Stephen Loya predated all of that. And he did come from Eastern Europe. I'm not sure what year he emigrated, but he was born and raised, as was his wife. And I believe his wife was related to the Bocskai family. And also, she was a distant relation to the old Austro-Hungarian royal family, the Hungarian royal family of the Austro-Hungarian Empire. And I think her name was Margaret, but she was always known as Pani, which was the familiar term for the priest's wife. And since she was there with so many kids and he was there for so long, they were kind of an institution in and of themselves. And they were very heavily involved in the church. Father Stephen Loya was also somewhat famous in that he worked with Father Julius Grigasi in publishing prayer books back in the 30s and 40s for our church. He was one of the sort of English editors and helped Father Grigasi with some of the books that I'm now selling.
Yeah, the one that we mentioned in the first episode. That's it.
Right.
Nice. Nice.
My pastor helped with the original English translation that went into that book. So I grew up in that church. We had catechetical religious ed. Back in those days, we did not have our own program, and so we were using the Roman Catholic Baltimore Catechism, which is a whole bunch of questions and answer. Who is God? Why did God make me? And then you had these, sort of fixed answers that you had to recite back to the teacher. And in my parish, because we had a large parish, we had large classes, we had Basilian sisters from Uniontown who would come every Sunday, and they were our teachers. We didn't have lay teachers until much later when I was in high school and after I left and graduated. But when I was a young boy, we had Basilian sisters as our teachers.
You mean
It's the sisters that are in Uniontown, Pennsylvania.
okay?
And their formal order is called the Order of Saint Basil the Great.
Oh, okay. Saint
And so they're known as Basilians.
Okay.
Sorry, I was using the more familiar term, the shortcut for OSBM.
Okay. No, because you said it. I'm like, Basilian. We're not making up numbers here, are we?
But no. It was not a bazillion in terms of a huge number. But
what I wanted to say, though, thanks for that. After that, I don't know why that jogged my memory. Yeah, the Baltimore Catechism was definitely. I bought it. I bought a compendium of all the catechisms when I converted. The Baltimore Catechism. The question and answer really threw me off. The question and answer format threw me off. I much preferred the streamlined catechism we have as for reading purposes.
Yeah. So one of the biggest events that I can remember, and it's because I got pictures of it, of course, is back in those days when you were in second grade, as the Roman Catholics did. A big deal was at the end of the school year, you made your first Holy Communion. And we did not have infant communion back then, as we do today, because we were trying to be like the Roman Catholics and not give communion to infants. And so you received your first Holy Communion at the age of 7 or 8, but at the end of second grade. And my parish was so large that our second grade class, so all the students that made First Holy Communion in 1962, there were 40 of us in one class from one parish.
And you had to process, right?
Yes.
The procession story.
Yeah, the procession story. I already told about that. So yeah, that was the big thing when I was in second grade. And then after that, I think around fourth or fifth grade, the cantor took me aside and taught me how to chant the epistle. And so I became an epistle reader. And then in high school, I was in charge of the altar servers. And we had a huge number of altar servers that we did rehearsals. And have I told the story of when we had teams and the assistant pastor had a competition for us?
No, you did not tell that story.
Okay. So when I was, I think probably about 8 or 9, we had a new assistant priest come because we had such a large parish. We needed 2 priests to serve. We had almost 1,000 people, I think. And his name was Father John Petro, of blessed memory, who passed away last year, was the seminary rector and a number of other titles. But back when he was first a young priest, he came as the assistant Duquesne, and he was put in charge of the altar boys. So he organized all of us into 4-person teams. You'd have 2 older boys that would handle the incenser and 2 younger boys that carried torches that were glass candle with big long poles. And we would hold them all through the liturgy where we stood in front of the altar. And then we would hold them up in procession as we would do processions. We even had to hold them up when we would kneel at the time of the consecration and communion. So it was tricky learning how to do that.
much stronger and much more durant, much stronger than I. I just was
Yeah.
part of a rosary rally, and I could barely hold up the umbrella for the hour that we were praying it.
The
Oh,
other thing I'm just remembering now is when we knelt down, there was a carpet that went up the center of the altar, 3 steps to where the main altar itself was.
yes.
Um, on the side of the altar or the carpet was the altar, which was made out of marble.
Hmm.
And we would have to kneel on the marble. We had no kneelers, we had no pads. We knelt on the marble itself, a very, very hard surface. So we had some tough knees back in those days.
Yeah, I had to get
So I
that by
remember, so
martial
we
art
were
training.
teams of 4, and so when Father John came, uh, he would put out a schedule, and each team would have a different liturgy. We had 2 liturgies every Sunday. The morning liturgy at 8:30 was the English for the young people, and the 10:30 was for the older folks in Church Slavonic. And the teams rotated through the month every week, different teams scheduled for each Sunday and so forth. Um,
Which
and
was
at
your
the end of the
favorite?
school, oh, I would, in fact, when I was not serving, I would go to the Church Slavonic liturgy with my grandfather. My parents took my sisters to the English one; they were in the choir, but I wanted to go with my grand. So my mother would drive, pick my grandfather up, and he would always go to the Church Slavonic liturgy, and I would sit with him in the pew, and then she would come and we either walk home after, or she'd come and get us because my grandfather lived about, oh, I don't know, maybe a mile from the church. And my grandfather, and my grandmother would go to the early liturgy with my parents and sisters, and then I would go to the 10:30 with my grandfather. And even on the Sundays when I would be scheduled to serve for the 8:30, I would still go to the 10:30 liturgy.
You just
Uh,
show up, be like, I'm going
I,
to
I,
two divine liturgies.
I enjoyed the Church Slavonic, and my grandfather had a great tenor voice, and he and I would just sing along the liturgy, and so I learned the Church Slavonic liturgy by heart even before I got to high school. So we'd had these 4 teams, and at the end of the school year, there was a competition, and every time we served, we would get a grade of how well we did. And at the end of the school year, Father John would tally up all the grades, and the serving team with the highest grade got a special treat. Well, it turned out the team I was on won the competition. And the treat was to go for a fancy dinner with Father John to one of the famous restaurants called the Oliver Restaurant in downtown Pittsburgh. It was in the Gulf Building, one of the old famous stone sort of high-rise buildings of Pittsburgh. But that was the big deal, to go from Duquesne up the river, the small little town, into the city of Pittsburgh and go out for this special dinner was a really, really big deal. And that was the prize for doing the best altar serving of our parish.
And did you win?
Yes, yep, we did, and went to lunch with Father John, and he and I were best of friends ever since then. That was like 1968, 69. So that's been almost 50 years that I've known him.
That's
No,
beautiful.
over 50. Yeah, 1970 to 20 is 50. So over 50 years I knew Father John.
You stayed in touch with him?
Oh yeah, he was my spiritual director when I was in the deacon program, and then he and I worked together when he was seminary rector. When he lived in Europe for 5 years at the North American College of Leuven in Belgium, and I was working at the time out of our London office, and I had business on the continent. I was always trying to make arrangements to have a weekend for my business trip and go visit and stay with him in Belgium. And we would go down to the little Eastern Catholic church that he had the key to in the center of Brussels. and we would have the Divine Liturgy, just the two of us.
Yeah. I mean, you can't really have the Divine Liturgy with just one person like you can with the Latin Mass.
That's right. That's right. The priest has to have someone there to sing the responses and participate in sharing the Eucharist. And he very rarely was able to do a Byzantine liturgy because there were no other Byzantines at the college. They were all Roman Catholics. So he would only go to the Roman Mass on weekends, concelebrate. He would preach sometimes. And it pretty much was only when I came that I could cantor for him and participate. And so me being there for the weekend was a big treat for him. And of course, it was a big treat for me to have a liturgy with Father John. And one year it happened to be on my birthday. So it was an extra
happy
special
birthday to you. But you didn't try to do what you did in U of R?
No. I didn't get there that often.
Well, you still could have brought it.
Yeah. So that was growing up in high school. I've already talked about the time in college where I brought in a priest to try to teach the others what the Byzantine Church was like. And then when I graduated from college, I got a job here in Washington, D.C. At the federal government, and I started going to the Byzantine Church in Beltsville, which was closest to Capitol Hill where I was living. But then after about a year and a half or so, I moved to an apartment in Oxon Hill, Maryland. And you would think Oxon Hill, Maryland was close to Beltsville, Maryland, but it wasn't because it was just across the river from Virginia. And so it was actually a quicker drive down the Beltway to get to Epiphany Church in Annandale for me than it was to go all the way up to Beltsville from where I lived in Oxon Hill. So I started going to Epiphany, pretty soon after I moved to Washington, around 1977, 78, and have been a member pretty much ever since, except for the 6 years that I was living away in Houston and London. But I got very involved with the Epiphany Church. I volunteered not only to cantor, because I had grown up with chanting the epistle and taught myself how to sing when I was in college, the story of the liturgy. So I became a cantor at Epiphany, and then volunteered to be one of the catechists. But I didn't get into any of the specific theology or grades, and since I had no kids, I wasn't so good with sort of particular students. So I offered to be the music teacher for the School of Religion. And we did not have the large buildings we have now. We just had the main church and classrooms. We had 4 that was in a temporary trailer set up next to the rectory. And so we would only have 4 classes at a time in the period between the liturgies when we had religious ed. So there would be 4 classes that would meet in the trailer. The other 4 grades, in front of 1 to 8, would meet with me in the church, and we would have a singing class. And I would teach them certain hymns out of the hymnal, or certain songs that we would sing during the liturgy, and explain to them how they fit into the liturgy. And then halfway through the hour and a half between liturgies, we would switch kids. And the kids I had would go to school, and the kids that were in class would come back into the church, and I'd go through the same rigmarole with them.
Were they picking up what you were laying down?
Yeah, they were, the kids were doing pretty good. And in December, we would have the St. Nicholas program, and I would help out with that program, and the kids would sing a couple of different songs as part of that program, along with, we did plays and a few skits and other things. And then of course St. Nicholas would come and give out cookies and see everybody, typical St. Nicholas like parishes in Pennsylvania do. I remember the one year though, I really wanted to do something that would relate to the kids. And so I taught the youngest grades, so this is grades 1 through 4. The youngest kids, sixth grade, ages roughly 6 to 9, 6 to 10. Back in those days, the most popular thing that was out was the Muppet movie.
Love the Muppet
And
movie.
so
Apparently, there was
the
a second there. There was a second, like a scene there, that was filmed on my old street where I used to live in New York.
oh wow,
Apparently,
okay,
there's a scene. I was like, oh, so every time I'm there, I'm like, yeah, I'm walking on Muppet Road.
yeah, yeah. So the first movie had a song, Rainbow Connection.
Hmm.
And so I taught the kids how to sing all the words to Rainbow Connection. And for the St. Nicholas program, we had the kids sing that for the rest of the parish, and it was a big hit.
I'm trying so hard not to sing it, but we don't want a copyright strike.
No, right, right.
My
So
goodness.
that was my recollection of my early days at Epiphany. Was helping out with religious ed and doing the music in St. Nicholas program. And I don't think I'll mention something. One St. Nicholas year, we thought of a interesting skit where we had a speaker that would read the poem "'Twas the Night Before Christmas,"
Hmm.
and we set up a stage in front of the iconostas because the church was our auditorium. We had to use multi-purpose. We had no big room.
Yeah,
The
but at least
the hall was
at
set
least
up.
you had one now.
Yeah, we do have
Iconostas.
one now. Yeah,
You have
the
one now.
hall was set up for the meal, so we had to have the program up in the church. And I, at those days, I had a dinner theater where I had some old leftover stages that I carried in. When we finished with Compline service, we carried the stage in, put a drop over the icon screen, and created a stage that was, a house with a fireplace where Santa Claus would mime what was being said in the program or in the poem by the narrator. And guess who got to play Santa Claus?
You?
Yep.
I mean,
But back in those days, I needed a pillow to add some padding. I don't need the padding anymore, but I needed a pillow to fill me out. But so I
you
played
need
Saint Nicholas.
the white spray for your beard.
Yep. I had a white beard and white hair and a cap, and I had the whole Santa Claus outfit. And because of the way the poem goes, of course, Santa Claus appears down the chimney, right?
How'd that
And
work?
so we had a hole cut in the backdrop where the chimney was with a black drape over it. And we had some chairs at the right height behind it that went through the deacon doors into the sanctuary. And so I got up onto these chairs and crawled on my hands and knees through the curtain opening and came out onto the stage through the opening that was the fireplace.
Pretty clever.
So then I go through all the actions of Santa Claus doing the things that are in, and then it comes to the line and putting a finger side of his nose, he turned and up the chimney he rose. So I did the finger thing, twisted around, got a little dizzy, got down to my hands and knees, crawled out back through the opening in the fireplace, but my rear end facing the audience, I got stuck and I couldn't get through.
Oh my god.
And the audience just laughing their heads off, looking at me trying to crawl back through the chimney.
Have you heard that song by it might have been by somebody else. I heard it from Alvin and the Chipmunks. Santa Claus got stuck in the chimney.
No, I haven't.
Santa Claus got stuck in the chimney. Yeah.
Oh, there is one. Oh, okay. Well, around
Yeah.
1978, 79, I got stuck myself. And finally,
Forgot what year that came out.
I just plopped down on my stomach and rolled through the opening to get off the stage, and the audience was howling. I'm not sure how many people realized, it was me. I'm sure everyone did, but anyway, that was one of my more humorous remembrances from Epiphany. Then I went off to Houston for 3 years and joined up. We had just opened a parish. Father Robert Carl had moved down there from Pittsburgh, and I knew him. He was another. He actually came to my parish at St. Peter Paul when Father Loya retired. So he was there all the years I was in college. So I got to know him pretty well. And one of the reasons I took the job in Houston was because he was there, and he was starting up a Byzantine Ruthenian parish, St. John Chrysostom. I became one of his cantors, but I was traveling so much and with my job that I couldn't do a whole lot else around the parish, but come and cantor weekends. And Father Bob was starting missions in both Austin, Texas and Dallas, Texas. And he had the largest group was in Dallas, and he would fly up there on Southwest Airlines every week to have liturgy at the University of Dallas until they bought a house and started their own little chapel. And one year for Holy Week, he was going to go up. He was going to do Holy Week, not Holy Week, Great Friday Vespers, and then Resurrection Matins and liturgy all in a 3-hour period because he could only afford to make one trip.
Yeah, do it all.
Yeah. Combine the whole weekend into one time period. And he asked me to go with him because he said the group up there can cantor a liturgy, but all the special melodies and special hymns that we need for Vespers and Resurrection Matins, they don't know. So I flew up with him for that year of Easter and cantored Good Friday, Resurrection Matins, and the liturgy all at one time.
How sore was your voice after?
Oh, it was, yeah, I was worn out. I didn't sing back in Houston that weekend. The other cantors sort of took over. So I was pretty worn out. Plus the flight was, it's not easy to get on an airplane that on and off in one day. We flew up, spent 4 or 5 hours on the ground, and then flew back. We didn't stay overnight or anything.
How long was the flight?
Well, the flight was an hour.
Okay.
But then we'd spend 4 or 5 hours on the ground, and then we'd fly back.
And also, I'm assuming it was a little bit of time before you got off the plane each time too, getting everybody ready. Yeah.
But back in those days, now remember this was
prior to 9/11.
Exactly, and so security in airports wasn't nearly what it is today. And Southwest Airlines flew from Houston to Dallas like every hour, like a bus, and they did not have seat assignments. You got a card that you picked up when you showed up at the airport, and that was the sequence number for boarding purposes. And you just got on and you took the first seat available, the first one you wanted. So it was like you got on the bus, you flew to Dallas, and you got off the bus. Walked, and we were just there for a few hours. We had no luggage. So we'd get off, we'd go meet someone from the parish that was there to pick us up. We'd go over to the chapel of the university, and we did the services. We'd have a little coffee and donuts, and we'd drive back to the airport and get the next flight back to Houston.
I mean, at least the flight wasn't too long.
No, right. So, and I learned that Father Bob, because he did this weekly, was on so many of the Southwest flights that he got to know the flight attendants very, very well. They recognized him because he was, one of the few people in a college. Yeah. Oh, yeah. And he was a very gregarious kind of guy. And, it was embarrassing.
Confessions in the bathroom?
No, not quite that. But when he walked on the plane, he'd have his collar on with a black shirt, so everybody knew he was a priest. He'd run over to these stewardesses that he would know, and he'd give them a big kiss and a hug. It was kind of embarrassing. Then I went to London for 3 years, and the only experience I had there was I tried to go to the Ukrainian Catholic Cathedral in downtown London that was all in Ukrainian. All the people there spoke Ukrainian, and since I didn't know any Ukrainian at all, they would sort of all say to me in the best English they could muster, "Well, what are you doing here? Why are you here?" So I only went once or twice, and then from then on, I had a cassette tape of the choir singing from Epiphany Church, and I put that on before the days of a lot of choirs making liturgy recordings. And so I put the tape on and I just sit and pray on Sundays from my home in London. So that was my early background in the church. I came back from London, 1991. I've been here at Epiphany and living in the same house. And then by 1993, I started my hobby of publishing books, which is a whole nother set of stories.
A whole nother journey, which we will be getting into. I believe it's next week that we move into the beginnings official. Yep. How you started OL, the conferences. That's next week.
Yep.
Yes.
So.
Yeah.
So so that gets us to the 90s, and I started Eastern Christian Publications and the Oriental Lumen conferences in those years. So we can talk about that next time.
And I'm looking forward to it. All right. Well, I think that finishes up this part of the story. I'm looking forward to next week because this is where most of the people who are here come from. The OL conferences and the adult enrichment lectures. All right. Well then, thank you everybody for coming for the third week in a row to listen to Jack's story. We thank you and have a good rest of your week. Don't forget about the lectures being posted every Thursday. God bless. Bye-bye for now.